Which brings me to this. Critics are having a field day. They are bloodying you.
Well, yes,
I
up
mean,
to a
obviously
point.
there are exceptions, but
Yeah, on the whole, yes. And all I can say to that is that it's, you know, Norma Mailer said you don't want to be assimilated and patted on the back too quickly. I always would aim, you know, would hope for strictly 50-50 reviews. I'd like some people to be very keen, some people to be appalled by a new novel of mine. This is perhaps tipped more to the 60-40 or 70-30. But I like a violent response, and I think it's an original book, and it's going to take a little bit to sink in.
okay, we'll have to talk about what it is, but just stay with this idea because it was just a whole, you know, it is the narrative we were on. Do you dramatically and vigorously reject the criticism that you see and read, saying yourself that's just wrong, they didn't get it, or do you say, well, maybe I didn't get there this time?
No, I don't say that. I felt very much in England that it wouldn't have mattered which of my books it was. Or indeed,
you were ripe for whipping.
Yeah, and it's a sort of culture war thing.
Culture
there.
war? What between?
Well, it's you know, it's a stratum and a generation of so-called literary journalists who felt that it was time to turn the tables on me. In England, in America, it's not so violent one way or the other, but in England, there's an unconscious feeling that I was born in 1922, that nonetheless I wrote Lucky Jim when I was 7, that I'm now in my mid-80s, yet I'm going to be around for another 20 years.
So it began with Kingsley and extends to you.
Yes, and I've outstayed my welcome, and I'm seen as a kind of genetic elitist, as if, you know, my novels were all hardwired into me at my birth, and it's just been a question of taking dictation.
Now here, at the same time, you know, you think about and write about in essay form or in review form lots of powerful, big ideas. Whether it is the notion of where we are and normalcy and not normalcy, whether it is the meaning of death and all of that. But what is this book about?
I think it's about what I've always been writing about.
What it means to be a man?
Yes, exactly. The paradox of masculinity and how male insecurity leads to violence. Now that's not an original thought, but it's dramatized in original ways, I think, in that book.
Tell me about the book and how you came to construct it that way.
It's one of those novels, it's actually a Victorian convention, you could say, where it begins with 3 or maybe even 4 plot lines.
Right.
And the reader should be thinking, how are these going to be brought together? They're all to do, each story is to do with a crisis in masculinity, in male potency, both literal and metaphorical. And and they're brought together and resolved against a slightly exaggerated and satirized modern reality, where, which reflects the feeling you get, and it can be either productive or not, that when you reach a certain age, the world begins to look not wrong or right, or attractive or unattractive, but it begins to look slightly alien to you. It's part of your preparation for leaving it. But I'm looking at the culture of, I suppose, the next generation after me, and finding it strange, and writing about it in a way that points
what is
to
it?
that.
The next generation after you is, you know, so what do you mean what do you find strange about it? I
feel that that a whole carapace of inhibition has been cast off in the last few years.
About
Well, loss of
license,
loss of shame, loss of embarrassability. It seems to me a very contradictory culture that's coming up because the emphasis is on equality, which has never been a very powerful American idea.
Right.
You know, liberty and fraternity, maybe,
right,
but not equality.
Right.
But the idea that looks are being democratized, that you know, all this scarification where you've got your door keys in one eyelid
right.
and your car keys in the other, as if the tyranny, the hierarchy, the elite of looks, which has always been very mysterious, why we find certain appearances more attractive than others. But this is to be obliterated in a kind of commonality. But while at the same time,
it's almost me. It's the pursuit of belonging.
Yeah, and identification with a tribe.
Right.
And so on.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you have rampant individualism, in which you know, this is a country consisting of 150 million superstars.
What about sex? The degradation of sex. I mean, what do you spent time researching this in conversation with a porn star?
I did, and I wrote a piece about pornography in preparation for writing this book. Well, I call it the obscenification of everyday life, and it's you know, we thought we were doing this when I was in my 20s. We thought we were scandalizing the previous generation, and now they're scandalizing us. But it seems to me that it's you know, what we worry about when we're talking about sex in the next generation is that all significance will be drained from it. And having asked around, I now get the impression that sex education is not in the hands of some school mom with drawing a diagram on her blackboard. It's being administered by pornography, and the young are getting their sex education that way.
And to what conclusion?
To reduce it, you know, ad infinitum or ad vertigonem. It's a question of performance and repertoire, and doesn't stem from feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it is about performance.
yes.
Yeah, and all the ads on the internet are about performance.
Yeah, and how to improve it.
Yeah.